Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this session. And it's quite an important one, I mean, it's almost like more than 1.2 million electric three-wheelers on India's roads in a very short span of the last 4 to 5 years. And they're representing sort of, more than 41% of all EVs in India, right, if I'm not wrong? So I think this is very important session from that perspective because we are seeing a total transformation in the last mile delivery space, especially after COVID, when the habits changed, nobody wanted to step out and, we wanted things to get delivered at our doorstep. So I think it's quite an important one from that perspective. And I just want to start off, Suman, from, asking you, what do you think are the key drivers? I mean, is it TCO of these vehicles that are driving, fleets to go completely electric now? What are the key enablers that are driving this shift?
Thank you. It's great to be here today. I think, yes, you already gave the answer. So primarily, it is TCO. The customer really it is economically beneficial today to drive an electric vehicle in the three-wheeler. Let me just talk about the three-wheeler segment, be it passenger, be it cargo. Right? So it's both. The TCO advantage is well proven in both, and obviously that's because it is after the subsidies as they stand today. In the cargo category, the electrification rate has been significantly higher than, say, in the passenger category, because one is obviously largely purchased by fleets, and then they make the economic decision, they have better financing. In the passenger category, where there's a financing challenge, it's a little bit slower to electrify, but still, 10 and 15%. That's sort of the biggest driver. The other thing I would say is that perhaps for charging, it doesn't require a very sophisticated infrastructure. The regular charging infrastructure, 15 amp socket, is adequate. So that is another, I would say, not a blocker. That enables us to electrify this category as fast as you're seeing. So the customer is fairly conversant. They have to look at the economic benefit, availability of financing, and their own parking as a solution. And therefore, this category, has been electrifying at the rate that you're seeing.
Right. And Mahesh, talking about subsidies here, and, we have recently seen this, there's been a bit of a pause on the subsidy side. So what is your opinion? I mean, are we going to see a significant dip in demand of these vehicles when, if at all, subsidies, they just don't come back?
See, any new technology adoption needs like three different legs have to act. One is the customer, the industry, and the government. I think all three have to do their part if a new technology has to get adopted. Customers are willing to buy EV, which has worked in last 10 years. I think we are willing to buy EV now is much higher in customers 10 years back. So the customers have moved a long way. Industry, I think we are investing a lot in the new technologies as well as capacity. We have come a long way in India, in particular for the industry. Government has also done substantial work, FAME 1, FAME 2, now we are talking about FAME 3. What is the overall benefit? We'll have to look at where the money is going. Today, if you look at Delhi, we are talking about pollution. You look at cities, we are challenging pollution. What is the healthcare bill? It's much higher than even the subsidy for EV, I would say. So where we have to spend, how we have to do it is the government policy. And government is, as of today, is supporting rightly the EV industry, which I would expect them to support for at least next 3 to 5 years. Because unless you see an adoption about 25%, it will be very difficult to sustain. And if you look at the global context, I think that is where I want to bring in. If you look at UK does a zebra funding for buying electric buses. You have European Union net zero funding from Europe. So everywhere, even recently till China, we had a funding till they adapted to double-digit adoption in each segment. So government is doing well today by giving FAME 1, FAME 2. I would expect that to continue. If we reduce or remove a subsidy, you will derail the EV adoption in India. My biggest concern is not derailing in India, but India will become incompetent globally. I think that is the bigger picture we need to keep in mind. So it's not about just supporting EV industry here. It is supporting the Indian EV industry to play at a global scale is the one which we have to look at.
Okay. I'll take that to you, Amitabh. Do you agree what Mr. Babu just mentioned, about the subsidy scheme of the things? I mean, do you believe that the LCV segment or the last mile segment, it's sort of come into an autopilot mode right now, that it is okay if you just remove the subsidies, it'll just fly on its own?
I don't think that it's as easy as that to, remove subsidies. I think ultimately you have to look at the investment that has gone in, and have we reached a place as manufacturers where we are in a position to compete with existing technologies. I think there's a significant gap. From what I recollect, some of these subsidies were introduced because battery packs were very high priced compared to, the ICE equivalent. And hence the subsidy was allocated according to the kilowatt hour of the battery pack that was being used. To that extent, the government has started the PLI scheme. I'm hoping that cells will start showing up very soon. I think the government should extend the subsidy till the time that cells are available in India for India at prices that can be sustained. That said, as a startup, you have to keep yourself prepared.
Right. Mr. Paul, your thoughts on this, please, Do you think, what are your thoughts on, the segment remaining afloat despite, no particular incentive from the government side? I mean, how we're talking about the last mile segment, the e-rickshaws and the e-LCV category. Yeah, the L5 category primarily.
See, I will answer this question a little differently. Actually, because we straddle 4 verticals of EV. We straddle L5M, we are straddling L5N, we straddle SCV, and we straddle tractors, all in EV space, and we straddle heavy commercial vehicles. We currently have a 55-tonner truck electric vehicle homologated and operating with customers. So, the perspective that we see is a little different. Actually, the segments that require a lot of support on the heavy commercial vehicle side, really, because the infrastructure on the battery and some of the other things is not built, should have a FAME subsidy because it's the largest polluting kind of vehicle. Similarly with tractors. I think, some of the policies of the government in the subsequent period will come through. Having said that, on the mature industry of three-wheelers, etc., it'll take a time because still now the supply chain is still not fully organized. I think all of us have lots of challenges in organizing a supply chain meeting the QCD requirements that the customer desires us to have, and therefore it has to be given to some kind of a fillip there.
Right, and I'll take that to you, Amitabh. I mean, like how Dr. Paul just mentioned, I mean, it's the new technology which is sort of becoming the disruptor right now. And you've been a newcomer in this space and you've sort of really, shown us the way forward. So what, according to you, I mean, is technology, new development, and, is this also one of the key drivers of what we are seeing in terms of transformation in this space today?
Absolutely. You talk of us being a recent entrant. We've been in this industry, I think, the longest amongst everyone here. We've been around since 2013. Obviously, a lot of development had to be done, a lot of R&D. I think we had at some point realized that data is going to be very important, and hence each of our components that we manufacture, and we do manufacture our own motors, controllers, the electronic stack, the telematics, the battery management system, the battery pack itself, supported by 32 global patents. But I think data, like Sir just mentioned, is the key driver for all of this. I think very soon, and I'm absolutely certain that EVs will distinguish themselves between each other only through software and data. And I think that is going to be key also to be able to interact with a lot of the participants. You were just mentioning about the future. The future is a lot of interaction between the various stakeholders, and the only way to get that interaction going and to get better results out of it will only be through data and the interaction of data.
Someone coming to you, Mr. Paul mentioned that, the supply chain, it's still sort of fragile, but, you are right now the number one player in the last mile space. You're almost at the verge of scaling up now. So what do you think? I mean, leveraging data, can we sort of streamline everything in this side of the thing?
See, this is a new industry space. Think about the ICE. And then I don't need to answer your question around supply chain. How many large global auto component EV exporters do you see out of India today as you look at ICE as a counterpart? That already tells you the answer. The EV ecosystem is evolving. We are all investing significantly. As you know, Mahindra has made significant investments in a different state. Here we are doing a lot of investment from MRV. We are all significantly investing to create the supply chain, to create the continuity that he has mentioned. But you compare it with the auto component industry of ICE, and that will tell you how far away we are to get to that level of state. I actually do not need to speak more. It's one of the largest global exporter. And to what Mahesh said, that is the goalpost that we should have, not just OEM product exports, but also auto component exports of EV should come out of India. Why would we leave out this large manufacturing opportunity? I don't know to save how many thousand crores, but certainly not billions of dollars, as he mentioned. So let's think with the scale-up perspective of a global export perspective.
Mahesh, what someone just mentioned, does it also hold true for the last, the e-bus category and the e-LCV category as well? Are you sort of strategizing from an export perspective on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are looking at technology sharing. We are looking at platform sharing. If you look at the E1 bus, which we are making for Europe, which we have showcased in the Paris Motor Show last year, it has about 70% of the components from the architecture, same from India. Looking at new global platform development, which will be between UK, India, and Europe. And even in LCV, we are looking at how do we make that globally competitive on a specific markets. We are not looking at LCVs in Europe or UK, but in a specific market category. But I think what is more important is the auto industry globally is going through a shift and a kind of, what I would say, evolution. And India has been not in the top 3 in the category in the first industrial and auto revolution. With EV, China has taken a substantial lead, and with software knowledge, with the electronics knowledge, and with the reasonable auto knowledge now, I think Indian auto industry should, if they integrate well, I think we will be able to look at top 3 auto manufacturing and also knowledge hub to the globe. If we look at that, then our actions will be different, and that's what we will look at.
Right. Mr. Paul, would you agree to what Mr. Babu has mentioned, and in terms of our opportunity with EVs to become leaders in the global space? So, do you want to add anything on that?
It's a very good question. I think we are all dreaming about all this. Actually, the way to look at this is, see, the opportunity, I think, is irreversible. I think a lot of us said that in this session, the earlier sessions also. It's only a question of how and when. Okay. Now, this how and when is also dependent on, some of the things that Suman mentioned about the development of the supply chain. Somebody mentioned about the software, because ultimately, an EV is a computer on 4 wheels or 3 wheels or whichever way you take it. But the chance of building customer intimacy that you never had before, actually you can do with this. In terms of, how your whole treatment towards your customer, the insurance piece that somebody talked earlier, and overall the ecosystem there in terms of this. So see, there is a diffusion of innovation that always happens. What you studied in a marketing classes many, many years back. It takes a little time for it to go, and then, it scales on. And personally, I am, and we are very upbeat about it, on the different segments we've seen today, our vehicles, they gave on a productive end of the vehicle, the TCO is very compelling, whichever segment you look at it, okay? And by compelling, I mean upwards of 25%. And since the TCO is so compelling, actually, if you overcame the barriers of this adoption, which is basically high price, so you have to figure out a way of disrupting to get the price down through battery leasing, making the battery smaller, so on and so forth, all kinds of stuff. And then you look at getting closer in terms of the charge cycle that we said. Then you have a very winning formula.
Amitabh, Mr. Paul just mentioned about this changing customer profile. So with EVs, with these electric three-wheelers, are we seeing more of driver come owners or, those sort of people, more entrepreneurs coming now? I mean, it's giving a chance to more, entrepreneurs to come into the space.
Yeah, I've seen the profile change over the last 3 years. So when we started in 2021, the only takers were B2B. And it was also from a technology startup perspective, it was an easy sale. Nothing was easy. It was an easier sale when you're talking about TCO benefits over a laptop, exchanging Excel spreadsheets. You're able to convince a prospective customer that you're going to save a lot. Of course, you're getting brownie points because as a corporate, you want to have a higher green quotient for your transportation. So that worked out well, but it was clear that the organized B2B segment in last mile is only about 10 to 12%, perhaps 15% of the market. The larger market is the unorganized, call it the unorganized B2B or the captive segment, as you call it. Someone has a gas cylinder agency, he has 2 vehicles with him. So that's the captive, and then there's the MLO segment, right? The driver cum owners. I think over the last, since March was the first month where Altigreen clocked 50% of their sales in the B2C segment, which is captive and MLO. And over the period of the last 6-7 months, that's been something that we've seen consistently. I think what's changing also is a little bit of mindset, for the driver cum owner and their need to, retain the vehicle for 10 years versus a 5-year under warranty life. I think more and more they're realizing that over that 5-year period, they're probably going to save a lot more than they ever did if they owned a vehicle, a diesel vehicle or an ICE vehicle. They would save a lot more than they did. So why not drive the vehicle only for that period when you are under warranty, where everything is covered, and then if it works, great. If it doesn't work, let's move on. So I think they're realizing that there is really no risk in this. As long as you have good financing options. And that has been the biggest thing for us to work around, to figure out better ways to be able to finance these vehicles. Until now, in three-wheel ICE vehicles, I mean, ad hoc financing was very, very high, man. It was close to like 30%. That was one way in which, startups who don't have, captive financing are in a position to deal with this by having to convince people. Once again, data. But yeah.
Right. Suman, this thing, is this changing customer profile also sort of giving way to a lot of, these innovative business models as well, battery as a service and mobility as a service, and do you think these sort of will prove to accelerate EV adoption in this segment going further?
I think India is such a large market. There's a fit-for-purpose solution for any kind of application you can imagine. There is a certain segment where battery as a service will work, right? Especially those that do not have access to a lot of financing. They cannot give that kind of down payment. They will give a much lower down payment. So battery as a service works very well for certain segment, as long as the infrastructure of swappability is developed around the area in which they operate. So someone else is putting in the investment so that they can do it as battery as a service, of course. So that is evolving. There is a lot of ecosystem. Again, I'm seeing in the recycling space, There are a lot of startups who are coming up there to figure out, how do we assess the second life of the battery or the recycling of the battery. Then I think there are many startups who are doing just around the data, software solution, telematics solution. Many of them suppliers were there in this conference. So there is evolution across all of these aspects. And it so happens at the beginning of every industry. You will have a whole bunch of solution and then, eventually there will be a few dominant and few tail. And that is what is going to play out here. There will be a few dominant applications for the mass of the market, and then there will be specific applications for certain niche segments. So yes, and all of it is going to help EV adoption. Because right now it's really not, this OEM versus that OEM in the space of EV. It is really that this whole large market can be electrified, can we drive sustainability, can we reduce tailpipe emissions, noise pollution, all that stuff. So we should be really focused on the big picture here and move towards that.
Right. Mr. Babu, Amitabh just mentioned about this, problem of financing, especially, with respect to startups. So what is your take on that? I mean, are you seeing the overall scenario sort of evolving in a much better way now? And going forward, also, I want to understand from you about the possibilities of consolidation in this space.
See, I think the financing portion of EV is not much talked about, and it's very much underrated. And charging is always overrated. So this is where the problem is. We always too much talk about charging for last mile mobility, which is not needed. Most of them do it at home, but we don't talk about financing. Let's talk about, since you talked about financing, let's talk about bus financing and the GCC model it is. Okay, it's good that Indian government found a way to get a GCC model for EVs, because STUs can never buy with a high cost of EVs. In fact, they are not even able to buy diesel buses. They will find it difficult to buy electric buses. So financially, they are all needs to be funded continuously from the state government. So look at the GCC model. GCC model is either an operator or OEM invest on the capital, both for charging, bus, everything. And then we collect pay per mile kilometer from the STUs. We talked about payment security and all that. So government want to talk about 10,000 bus purchase in a year. So the 10,000 bus purchase of a EV is going to be like 12 to 15,000 crore of funding requirement need in a year. And 12 to 15,000 crore means even if you take a 70-30 ratio, you are talking about 400 to 500 crore equity investment and about 10,000 crore bank funding, right? 10,000 crore bank funding to single entity other than SBI, nobody can do. So you will buy one cycle of 10,000 and then what do you do for the next 10,000? You will find it difficult, right? So finance is a very big challenge for any business. I think in India we underestimate it, and it's a very important for any new technology adoption, new business industry growth, everything. We have been talking about it to government on this, with many banks, how we will do it, how to bring in funding. Recently, good news is that when Prime Minister went to US, now US has agreed to fund green mobility in India, and they are talking about how to fund such large bus projects. So a lot of things are happening now, and the recognition of funding is very, very critical. In terms of startups, it's very important that there is a pool which will, there are three steps, right? So one is idea generation, another is scaling up, and then creating a big business model for export. I think the three needs to be segmented and see what we are funding. Even in startups, we are gung-ho about the IIT, the initial first portion of it, and then we depend largely outside on the second and third portion of scaling up and making a large global organization. I think that's where we are not focusing much. I think that's what India needs to pick up more. Not only in EV, any sunrise industry, I would say that's the area we need to pick up more.
Right. Mr. Paul, do you think that is going to be a key challenge for a lot of these startups? And What is your take about consolidation in this space in the coming years?
The challenge for startups is like anybody else. I think all of us are startups. You know, many of us who are new incumbents actually face existing incumbents. But worldwide, if you look at the EV space, many of the leading players are new incumbents. You know, there's no incumbency there. It's a question of how each manages the business model. But having said that, I think the point that Mahesh was mentioning about financing is a real issue, whether it's a big finance or a small finance. You know, currently the terms are quite unfavorable. They need to be looked at in a little different way, particularly when the cost of the vehicle is that much more, actually, many times 2 times more, you know, in some cases. And just imagine a heavy-duty truck, you know, when you want to sell it, what will be the price of that as opposed to the diesel vehicle? So there are challenges there. But I think for the startups, there are lots of startups that are coming up on the charging infrastructure, on the swapping infrastructure, you know, on the telematics piece, you know, how you get the data mining piece. And then if you superimpose that, there are not many guys who have come on with artificial intelligence on that to actually automate the telematics data that you get. That would throw up a huge opportunity for the startups. The problem is world-class components, EV component manufacturers, what Suman was alluding to while earlier in the first part of our talk. That's very important for us to build a healthy ecosystem. But a lot of people every day, they are emerging with something or the other in this jugaad country, you know, and at the end of the day, I think we should see a stable infrastructure developing for us in terms of this, which has finance on one side, which has, you know, your supplier base on the other side, and which has manufacturing as the OEM at the other side. Once that's there, I think there is a huge chance to take on and accelerate this growth, which all the EV manufacturers can do actually.
We'll close this session here, and thank you very much everyone for taking the time out. Mr. Paul, Mr. Babu, Suman and Amitabh, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.